Byron Lee was another Chinese Jamaican who made a major contribution to the island's music, several in fact. He was musician, band leader, producer, label, studio owner, businessman. The list goes on. Many accolades to his name, prolific recording career, though his music sometimes dogged by a stigma of being crossover-oriented, somehow not authentic enough, perhaps perception applied retroactively as during the lifetime of his band, which ran for decades. They were very popular, released many albums, most of which can be had quite affordably, have never quite caught on with record collectors, have never had a cachet of collectability. These records may not knock your socks off, but they're always pleasant, always enjoyable. Lee had some mixed African heritage as well. His father had come from Hong Kong, while his mother was a native-born Jamaican who had a bit of African ancestry. He spent his childhood in rural Jamaica, absorbing some of the local African-derived folk traditions around the island, later moving to Kingston. He attended St. George's College and played on the football team called the Dragons, along with his good friend Carl Brady. In the 1950s, they decided to form a band, which they named the Dragonaires, named after the football team, but with airs added to the end to sound more like a musical group. Lee himself played bass, Carl Brady percussion, I believe. They began touring around the island, playing calypso, mento, the local Jamaican version of calypso, and rhythm and blues became very popular. Around 1959, Lee would introduce the very first electric bass guitar on the island for the practical reason that it was easier to transport to their gigs rather than the stand-up acoustic bass, the instrument soon gaining popularity on the island, but Lee brought it in first. Around 1959, he would make his first record, a song called Dumplings, produced by music impresario and future Prime Minister of Jamaica, Edward Seaga, beginning a long personal and professional association between Seaga and Lee. Lee would begin issuing the first of his Byron Lee and the Dragonaires LPs in the early 1960s. The band would also appear on screen in a scene in the first James Bond film, Dr. No, as the band playing in a bar scene. Byron Lee and the Dragonaires, seen on film very early in their career. By 1962, Edward Seaga had heard of a new rhythm being played in the ghettos of Western Kingston on the sound systems based in that area. This was the time of Jamaican independence. The island was breaking free from Great Britain. There was a mood of public optimism, and Seaga was looking for an authentically Jamaican music that could harness this mood of optimism and present Jamaica to the world. Accordingly, he commissioned Byron Lee and fellow band leader Carlos Malcolm to go down to Western Kingston and check out this new beat, which was called ska. Byron Lee soon absorbing this, adding it to the Dragonaires' repertoire. In 1964, the World's Fair in New York City included a contingent of Jamaican performers sent there to promote the island. They were hoping also to promote ska as a possible successor to the calypso craze Harry Belafonte had started some years before. Byron Lee and the Dragonaires would be selected to be the musical backing band for artists like Jimmy Cliff, Millie Small, and Prince Buster. Some opined that the real originators of ska, the Skatalites, had been snubbed in favor of the more upscale, more polished Byron Lee and the Dragonaires. Lee himself countered that the Dragonaires, with their heavy reliance on cover versions, playing what their audience wanted to hear, were more versatile than the Skatalites, who had more of a niche audience. Others complaining that the Skatalites perhaps were seen as a bit revolutionary, counting as they did some Rastafarians in the membership. Lee himself, unabashedly populist in his approach to music, playing what his audiences wanted to hear. Accordingly, this would be a lot of cover versions, either of songs by other Jamaican acts, international acts, all done in a very polished and professional manner, always enjoyable. Many of his albums will be pleasant listens. They might not necessarily knock your socks off, but all worth hearing that I've heard. The 1964 New York World's Fair appearance by the Jamaican artists wasn't a big success. Ska did not take off quite as they hoped for, though Byron did link up with the Ertegun brothers of Atlantic Records, Ahmet and Nsuhi Ertegun, who issued a record called Jamaica Ska, attempting to promote ska in America with music supplied by Byron and his Dragonaires, though under the pseudonym of the Ska Kings. Although the international crossover move hadn't quite come off as they had hoped for, Byron nonetheless would continue recording, lose no time in bringing ska more fully into his repertoire as it took over the island. Initially not that popular with the island, with Jamaica's middle and upper classes, until it did begin being released overseas by the likes of Blue Beat in the UK. Blue Beat, actually, only the second release that celebrated label put out was Byron Lee and the Dragonaires' first song, Dumplings. 1964 would see Byron Lee issue the Dance the Ska LP. They were attempting to sell ska as a dance craze, so band manager Ronnie Nasrallah, along with Jeanette Phillips, had to make up some dance moves for the photographs, some instructions on the back cover, and this shows Byron Lee and the Dragonaires with their heavy reliance on cover versions. Herbie Hancock's Watermelon Man, Dumplings on here as well, cover of Stranger Cole's Rough and Tough, always one or two originals mixed in there as well. That is on the BMN label. This was a find at Freewheelin' Records in my area some years ago, sadly missed. Rest in peace, Vince. Another one I found at Freewheelin' was The Many Moods of Lee, also issued 1964. Even more cover versions on here with Ackerbilk's Stranger on the Shore, The Days of Wine and Roses, always mixed in with a couple of originals by band members who included other Chinese Jamaicans, Peter Chung on congos, Keith Lin on vocals, apparently part Jamaican himself. The Many Moods of Lee, gatefold sleeve there, Byron and the Gang, neat laminated sleeve, and that is on the Kentone label, another find from Freewheelin' Records some years ago, closed down about 2020, I believe. Byron would also start producing other artists. He had vocalists appear with the group, such as Keith Lin, who's on that album. Ken Lazarus would do some vocals. Also, the Blues Busters and Barry Biggs in coming years would be closely associated with the band. The Blues Busters would begin their own LP releases with 1965's Behold How Sweet It Is, produced by Byron Lee. The Blues Busters, found that locally, just down the road from me at an antique store. That's on the Sunshine label. Again, quite middle of the road music here. Vic Taylor would be another singer who would perform with the Dragonaires, would record some of his own LPs. This is from a little bit later. Vic Taylor does it his way. Very uptown, very polished, soulful. This is on the Dynamic label. Byron, once ska began winding down, he would adapt to the new Jamaican rhythm. 1966 saw the arrival of rocksteady as the successor to ska. Byron Lee would move with the times. Here's People Get Ready. This is Rocksteady, 1967, updated sound by Byron Lee on the Bra label. I think this is a US pressing. Again, sticking to the same format of cover versions, the occasional original tune, couple of calypsos in there as well. Byron Lee continuing to keep up to date, stay contemporary. He would begin adapting to the reggae rhythm as well. Once that came in around 1968, issuing a series of LPs. He had also become owner of Whirl Studios, WIRL, West Indies Records Limited, by the late 1960s, refurbished the studio and renamed it Dynamic. Label and studio owner, pressing facilities as well, I believe. You saw the Dynamic label on that Vic Taylor LP, and the Dragonaires LPs would also start to appear on Byron Lee's own Dynamics label. With Reggae Blastoff, early reggae album, spelt reggae with a Y, very early spelling of it there, but same Byron Lee format, covers of the Maytals Monkey Man, Andy Capp, Linford Anderson's own Papa Top on here, Melodian's Sweet Sensation, even interestingly, Little Roy's Bongo Naya, but all done in the more polished, more uptown friendly Byron Lee style, engineered by Andy Capp, Linford Anderson, recorded at Dynamic Studios, Byron Lee's own studio. Reggae, hot, cool, and easy. There's the whole gang there, the whole Dragonaires band. These are all late 60s, early 1970s. I think this one was a thrift find for me. Even got a cover of Shaft right next to Sweet City Woman by the Stampeders, Canadian hit. Mammy Blue, typical Byron Lee format. Reggae Round the World, another one from the same early 1970s era. Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, nothing too revolutionary on here. dynamic as usual. Byron would also begin hiring out the studios to other artists, with many artists and their albums, single releases appearing on Dynamic. Freedom Sounds by Ras Michael and the Sons of Negus, diametrically opposed to Byron Lee's own recordings, but recorded at Dynamic, produced by Pete Weston, Carlton Lee Engineering, another Chinese Jamaican, Carlton Lee, and on the Dynamic label, different design, same studio, diverse as Calypso, Jamaican Duke, appearing on Dynamic label. The studio would also begin attracting the attention of international acts, with Paul Simon recording Mother and Child Reunion on there, with the backing of the All-Star Session Band, recorded in Jamaica at Dynamic Studio. Eric Donaldson producing Kent Village LP, Yellow Dynamic label this time. That one co-produced by Byron Lee. The Rolling Stones would also reportedly record Angie there. By the mid-1970s, though, reggae had taken a decided turn towards Rastafari, revolution. These subjects were not to Byron Lee's taste at all, and he would begin to musically shift over to calypso, its offshoot soca, and various other styles for the remainder of his career, continuing to pump out albums, some of them in the soca style, quite cheesy, with scantily clad ladies on the cover. Around 1990, I believe, he would found a Jamaican Calypso Carnival in the style of Trinidad and other Jamaican islands, with his aim of bringing downtown and uptown audiences together, united by music. He would continue to perform internationally. I can remember the annual visit by the Byron Lee and the Dragonaires being an event in my town for the Caribbean community there. I never went. 50th anniversary, 3-disc compilation of some of his hits. Found this in a thrift store a few years back. Don't think this is even on Discogs. Might be. I'll have to check. Various styles, some of his soca hits on the first disc, more mellow sounds on the second, and some earlier sides on the third disc. Some good stuff on here. Byron Lee would pass away in 2008 following a battle with cancer, one of the great Chinese Jamaican musical pioneers who maybe did not quite get the respect he deserves.
Pretty, pretty little girl, everywhere I go. Don't you know, there's got to be a pretty girl there. Pretty, pretty little girl, pretty, pretty little girl. One of her latest recordings. It said simply, if I have the wings of a dove. Where's Byron?